Here we begin, calling her name, calling her in. Alexis.
This is the very beginning and the very end of Equinox by Audre Lorde. My daughter marks the day that spring begins. I cannot celebrate spring without remembering how the bodies of unborn children bake in their mother's flesh like ovens, consecrated to the flame that eats them, lit by mobile oil and Eastern Standard. Unborn children and their blasted mothers floating like small monuments in an ocean of oil. Today, both children came home from school talking about spring and peace, and I wonder if they will ever know it. I want to tell them we have no right to spring because our sisters and brothers are burning, because every year the oil grows thicker and even the earth is crying, because Black is beautiful but currently going out of style, that we must be very strong and love each other to go on living.
I see that Professor Boyce Davis is here.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm on my
Yes,
phone,
we
so it looks
can.
different.
Unless
Yes.
you sound it in one more time. Yay!
You persevered.
Great.
That's a great
Sunday
welcome.
sweet.
Wonderful. Yes.
Please.
Grenada
Don't mind.
Revisited, an interim report. The first time I came to Grenada, I came seeking home, for this was my mother's birthplace, and she had always defined it so for me. Vivid images remained of what I saw there and of what I knew it would could become. I came to Grenada my second time, 6 weeks after the invasion, wanting to know if she was still alive, wanted to examine what my legitimate position as a concerned Grenadian American was to what the military invasion of this tiny black nation by the mighty United States. I looked around me, talked with Grenadians on the street, the shops, the beaches, on porches in the solstice twilight. Grenada is their country. I am only a relative. I must listen long and hard and ponder the implications of what I have heard, or be guilty of the same quick arrogance of the United States government in believing their external solutions to Grenada's future.
Coal. I is the total black being spoken from the earth's inside. There are many kinds of open. How a diamond comes into a knot of flame, how a sound comes into a word, colored by who pays what for speaking. Some words are open, like a diamond on glass windows, singing out within the crash of passing sun. Then there are words like stapled wages in a perforated book, buy and sign and tear apart. And come whatever wills all chances, the stub remains, an ill-pulled tooth with a ragged edge. Some words live in my throat, breeding like adders. Others know sun, seeking like gypsies over my tongue to explode through my lips like young sparrows bursting from shell. Some words bedevil me.
It is sometimes both the curse and the blessing of the poet to perceive without yet being able to order perceptions. And that is another name for chaos. But of course, it is out of chaos that new worlds are born.
We have begun circling with breath and with sound. And we've done this as a way of spiraling and forming a container together, a moment in time to show up and be present, but also beginning this way as a way of grounding together with you who are in cyberspace. I can't even see how many you are, but this circle, as small as it is on my screen, I imagine is having this kind of ripple effect because we have invoked the name, the spirit, the wisdom, the transgenerational, transcontinental, global power and generosity of being that is Audre Lorde. As we speak her name, we also came in through the voice of fellow poets, authors, writers, many carrying the fire forward that she birthed in her lifetime. Welcome to this circle. Welcome to the Time of the Writers, Living Legacy of Audre Lorde, Resonances, Reflections, and Intersectionalities. And we began that way also to make sure that we don't stay in the cerebral zone, but bring our whole bodies into this conversation, that our listening is that deep, that it taps into cellular memory, not only what we have been taught in institutions about her legacy or what we've read in books or seen in videos, but that we figure where that connection is at the visceral level. What is it that is resonating? What is it that lit that fire for each of you that have shown up in this moment? I want to express my gratitude to the Zap Poetry Project as well. My name is Malika Ndlovu, and it's my joy to be holding space today with each of you. And we are, as the blurb acknowledged, recognizing connections between the 90 years since Audre Lorde's birth and the 30th anniversary of our democracy in South Africa. And of course, we are navigating great cusps globally, historically, and resonances and synchronicities that come not only through what we see outside, but the works that we are birthing. And each one of you, Alexis Pauline Gumbs, Phillippa Yaa De Villiers, Professor Carole Boyce Davis, and Uhuru Phalafala. Woohoo! All your names in my mouth excite me. I have been so fed by your work in the world, and it is such a joy to be here in this moment with you. And I'm sure that there's that level of excitement also in the rest of this room. Unfortunately, Lebo Mashile was unable to join us, but she sends her loving energies to the circle as well. And we are going to circle back to that first sound of the words that you brought into the circle, thinking about the timelessness of what it is that you spoke from Audre's body of work, and how she speaks into our present times and still ignites global and transgenerational spaces in which that fire of her activism lights us up in some way, in multiple ways, in fact. And throughout this journey of 90 minutes, we are looking at that timelessness, expanding historical webs of time, but also ancestral time, how that legacy of work is also feeding into the future. This kind of spiraling notion of time that's constantly expanding. So I want to invite you again in the sequence that you began, beginning with you, Alexis. Share a little bit more about why you chose that extract of Equinox. Yes, we are definitely in alignment with the cosmos with that poem right now. But tell us a bit more about how you came to meet Audre Lorde and how she has fed your bodies of work and why you chose that particular extract.
Thank you so much. This is such a beautiful space. I'm so honored to be in this circle with you all. So yes, Audre Lorde, cosmically aligned. And I felt like I had a different idea of what I would share. And I felt like she woke me up this morning like, girl, it's equinox, you know, like, get it together. And I've recently completed a biography of Audre Lorde called Survival is a Promise, The Eternal Life of Audre Lorde, which comes into the world August 20th. I'm so excited. I'm so honored. And one of the things that I know from studying Audre Lorde's journals over many years is that she was thinking about the equinox, she was thinking about the solstice, she was thinking about the meteor showers. She was really thinking about her role in the universe, and that had material consequences. So equinox, she's talking about, it's the spring equinox here. I know it's fall equinox in South Africa. For her, she was thinking her daughter also is born close to the equinox. So she's thinking about life, and then she's thinking about what's happening to the children around the world, which I think is always timely, but certainly timely in this moment. The thing I thought I was going to bring is from this pamphlet that the Kitchen Table Press created, part of the Freedom Organizing series. And there's an essay that Audre Lorde wrote called Apartheid USA. You can see the pin that it came with: no to apartheid, no to racism. And what she's doing in this essay is the same thing that she does in the full poem of Equinox, which is to connect the racist, hetero, patriarchal capitalism of the United States to the role that imperialism is having all around the world. And in the moment that she writes this, she's listening on the radio to the UN special session, state of emergency in South Africa, right? Where like human rights are suspended from Black South Africans because the resistance is happening, which I think about in relationship to Haiti right now and the suspension of Haitian self-determination that's going on right now, also facilitated by the UN. I know Audre Lorde would mention that if she was here, not only because as Dr. Boyce Davis reminds us, she's a strong Afro-Caribbean daughter of the Caribbean region, thinking about what's happening there all the time, but also because she was accountable to this planet. So there's this place, she makes all the connections between the things that are going on, and the essay is profound, and I hope you all read it. But I want to go to this one sentence where she says, like the volcano, which is one form of extreme earth change, in any revolutionary process, there is a period of intensification and a period of explosion. We must become familiar with the requirements and symptoms of each period and use the differences between them to our mutual advantage, learning and supporting each other's battles. This is why I think Audre Lorde would celebrate the solidarity of South Africa with the people of Palestine at this time. And she just wouldn't let me sleep if I didn't say those things. Now, I'll say that for myself, Audre Lorde is so key to my relationship as an earth being to this planet. As a Black feminist born at the time I was born, there just is no understanding of who I would be without the impact of Audre Lorde's work, especially her poetry, which I found first. And the biography, Survival is a Promise, it's not a coincidence that I chose the sentence about the volcano. It really reminds us that Audre Lorde was a student of the earth. She saw herself as part of the earth, and she studied earth itself, like geology itself, volcanoes and earthquakes and stones on this planet, and then, you know, the circulation of the universe. And this this presence of Audre as not only a cosmic force, but also a reminder to us that all her poems are about relationships, but they're not metaphorically talking about volcanoes and the equinox. They actually are reminding us that our primary relationship to each other is as this earth. And that is the mission of this particular way that I've written this biography. And I'm so grateful that Audre Lorde is present with us at this time, which is so crucial for our relationship on Earth as a species and whether Earth will continue to be in relationship with us. So thank you. I look forward to the discussion, and I'm really honored to be here with you all today.
Deep gratitude, Alexis, for that input, for your constellating us in this moment, across continental space and aligned with earth cycles, reminding us also of this illusion of separation, because you spoke so much about connection. And we are reawakening so much at this time to the illusion of distance and separation when it comes to the things that she invoked through her work and evidence the timelessness of it. Thank you so much for expanding the web for us in this way in the conversation now. Phillippa, please tell us a bit more about the way that you came to that particular voicing of Audre Lorde.
Oh, but I think that I was after Professor Davis.
We can turn this around
Yeah,
at that
sure.
moment. Back into the room, please. And Prof, we can call you Doctor or Prof. Are you comfortable with either? Because you seem to be both in this room and beyond.
Well, first of all, I've always engaged with the fact that Audre Lorde claimed all of her identities, and she was very adamant that she wasn't going to privilege one over the other. And in that constellation of identities, being a Black feminist was really prominent. There's a lovely quote that I have from her in Moving Beyond Boundaries, where she says that Black feminism for her is about articulating ourselves, our needs, and our resistances as women. And as women within our particular environments, we don't exist in abstract. Our Black woman's vision has no horizon. So for me, given the angle I chose, the Caribbean angle, for me, Caribbean uh, identity has to do with a series of expanding understandings of space. So beyond the island identifications to the Caribbean and its connections with places like Brazil and, of course, North America, of course, the larger Caribbean diaspora, and then the world. But within that context, one of the important links I wanted to make between those two positions, that Black feminist position and the Caribbean position, is that affirmation that Alexis talked about, challenging really large settler colonial contexts that seem to also want to expand in all the directions that we know they're doing now. So each time one moves beyond it, it's sort of like you pull back into a sort of vortex of this horribleness, as one has to say about the war and the people of Palestine and the U.S. supporting of them with weaponry and at the same time um, dropping food every now and then, and sometimes the food itself falls on people and kills them. There have been at least a couple occasions. So, how to handle this sort of global colossus that the U.S. has become, and how where does the Caribbean fit in that? So, for her, this constantly expanding logic of Caribbean spaces is this outward. In that, I love the image that Nancy Morehan uses, sort of circular patterns of dispersal, where it's just not people in terms of the demographics, the culture, the food, the music, the entire range of relationships, so that it's not just limited to that small location, but all of it. That's really the world in the end, and that space for all of us is limitless. So that logic about our Black women's horizon has no vision is to me a kind of guide quotes that we have to always keep in mind as we work our way through the world, that we always in relation to so many others living other experiences. So in that connection, her work with Gloria Joseph to create CISA, Sisters in Support of South Africa, with Ellen Kuzueo during the height of apartheid was one of those ways of bringing those pieces together. We want to affirm that, particularly with this event coming from South Africa, but also the really amazing strength it took for South Africa, which really gave us so much pride across the diaspora to really come out in support of the people of Palestine and actually to make a case, really credible, lovely case. So I linked it to, as well, just one final point, to a We Charge Genocide document, which was put out many years ago. And I see those two as linked because the first one had to do with the lynchings of African Americans, and as you know, still various versions continue. And of course, how that links as well to the South African, we charge genocide. So we still charge genocide. In other words, and to me, we should be able, wherever we are in the world, as Black people, as people of conscience, that if we are witness to really horrendous treatment of others, that we say this does not really go with anything that I support and believe, and therefore I disavow it. I think publicly we should all be able to make that personal declaration, but for a whole country to do it as well, we really honor and respect that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am so touched by the connection that we're having, and it's making me think about the Johannesburg Festival of Women Writers, which happened last weekend, which was convened by Barbara Masekela, Makosazana Kaba, and a number of other significant Black feminists in Johannesburg. And the keynote speaker was none other than the daughter of the Caribbean and Ghana, Margaret Busby, the editor of Daughters of Africa, which made most of us into writers. Let's be honest, you know. And I, so for me, it was just so wonderful to spend time in the sisterhood. And, it also reminds me so much of Audre Lorde and the sisterhood. But there's something that I found particularly compelling about Audre Lorde, especially from this, and so I also started like Alexis. I had so much, and I wanted to read from her essay called, well, it was a keynote speech called "The Uses of Anger." And the way that she poetically uses anger as a means of actually clarifying and bringing people together, something that is inherently divisive. She actually teaches us how to use constructively, but it's too much. And it's like, and my son also and I, we had a whole discussion about it. And he said, as a Buddhist, Ma, you can't be allowing people to indulge anger. but I'm still fascinated with it. I feel like it's very much a private process, and it's this thing, some words live in my throat breeding like adders. And the thing is, and I also associate that so much with Caribbean writing, and a Caribbean use of language. There's such a richness in images, and they're so immediate and so startling. And so I went to the poem. So I also find that such an interesting aspect of Audre Lorde as a poet, the way she conceived of the world, she conceived of the phenomena of humanity in a poetic way, but then could also expound on it and push us also to practical application of her theories. So that was my initial kind of thrill.
Thank you, Phillippa, for bringing in the alchemy of that practice. Uhuru, you've taken that breath. Come in, sister.
I too want to add a word of gratitude for being a part of this circle. I am honored and I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to repeat the excerpt from the essay, Eye to Eye. It is sometimes both the curse and the blessing of the poet to perceive without yet being able to order perceptions. And that is another name for chaos. But of course, it is out of chaos that new worlds are born. So as someone who is deliberate about refusing the terms of order of this world, this heteropatriarchal, capitalist, colonial world, who refuses its lovelessness, its disembodiedness, its forms of relations that are based on domination and coercion, its disenchantment with my wondrous body and that of the earth. And as someone who's wholly dissatisfied by the death machine and deathscape of this civilization, I'm always dreaming of making new worlds. Not only do I dream of them, I am engaged in my everyday life in being disloyal to, in marooning and plotting the how of ending this anti-Black colonial capitalist world. Audre Lorde teaches me to find home in chaos, to be adept at embracing chaos, to hold and suture the curse and the blessing, the order and disorder, the old and the new, the dying and the yet to be born. To trust my perceptions as a basis for fundamental, long-lasting change and action. The good Lord instills and reinforces in me the affirmation that my perceptions are not only powerful, but dangerous to the prevailing order. That my perceptions and depth of feeling, the niggling and ever-present feelings of injustice, of rage, resistance, and the continued maladjustment that I feel hold life-giving, vital and vitalizing world-making possibilities. That they are a replenishing source of power and information. That they are a map towards other experiences of self and community, of past and future, of drive and purpose. Audre Lorde teaches me to not be afraid of chaos, to dance with it in flow and in reverence, to make of chaos a longed for bed, which I enter gratefully, and from which I arise empowered.
Phew. The silence is good for digestion. Each one of you have fed us so much in a matter of 20 minutes and taken us to places that collapse the idea of linear time, that collapse the ideas around an inevitability of the violence that we are continuing to see. And I thank you for bringing into the conversation the language of boundlessness, of constellations of identities, of ways of navigating who we are and what we are here to do beyond the physical location of South Africa. When I think about who I am as a poet, as a healer through whatever art medium necessary, I feel like it is an agenda that is completely shaped by the earth from which I didn't randomly emerge. And everything that each of you have contributed to the conversation so far has that feeling of the burning edge or the emergent edge, not these fixed, concrete, brutal borders that say, oh, and now we'll speak to you who's from over there. And as we think of the others over there, that it's not even in this language. And deep gratitude for the ways in which you have brought your own, spoken to your own work in connection with Audre's legacy. And I'm hoping that we can go a little deeper into that, into how you have been navigating new bodies of work, ones that have a particular aliveness at this time. Because each of you also spoke about this time, even as we referenced the state of emergency in our country, as we recognize that genocides are a pattern. It's a recurring pattern. And even if we don't use the word apartheid or genocide, that is what is happening in multiple places concurrently, even if the media is not exposing this. And how is it that our first impulse in many ways in the work that we do is to figure what is the transmuting? How do I, as Uhuru said, respond with a disloyalty to these systems and embrace the chaos and in a way surrender to the anger that must be there? Not as in very wisely your son said, Phillippa, not to perpetuate further destruction, but to ask the question of what is the place for this anger, and who has led the way, who has given us a torch or lit a pathway for the uses for this anger. We need to be able to speak to those things openly across generations. So many young people are asking what to do with this anger, or with an anger that feels paralyzing and leaves a sense of impotence.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, do you mind if I just jump in?
Not at all.
Because he says in the keynote, he says everything can be used except what is wasteful. You will need to remember this when you're accused of destruction. So I think it's this thing of everything can be used. So like there's this thing of suturing the dying to what is yet to be born. There's this, there's this thing of like, instead of just turning away from things, you don't just randomly just make a new world. Your new world is made of the bones of the old. It's like you take things from where you come from. And it's very much like Audre Lorde was definitely a sangoma. Was definitely a sangoma. Is a sangoma.
Ehe.
Yeah, I'll just add. I mean, so in that conference paper of the uses of anger that she gave at National Women's Studies Association meeting, she's also referring to her own poem, that piece, right?
Yeah.
For each of you, poem to her children, right? And of course, you're talking about it with your son. I think that intergenerational accountability, Malika, that you spoke to us a moment ago, is key to that, right? That it's not. As you said, it's not random, it's not disconnected. What becomes possible is it becomes possible on an intergenerational scale. And so, and often, I mean, studying my own anger, guided by Audre Lorde's work on the uses of anger, and also from Eye to Eye, Black Women, Hatred, and Anger, this understanding that when I when I go to find the root of my anger, it's always love. It's often an intergenerational love. It often comes from seeing my elders or my eldest elder, this earth, or my other elders being disrespected. It comes
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
our children being put in harm's way, right? When we look at what is it, like what is it that really is calling us to this anger? It's our deep intergenerational love that is
Mm.
there, which is why it's that deep intergenerational love that always must guide us.
Mm.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Love is calling us to anger. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's so vital and vitalizing to realize that at the root of our rage is a deep love. It is a deep love that makes us respond to injustice, to not sit and take it. I was deeply impacted and transformed by Audre Lorde's essay on the erotics, the uses of the erotic. It just gave me so much permission when I held many questions in my own work, which is on social movements, anti-apartheid, anti-colonial, anti-imperialist civil rights movements. I held the question of what makes people resist. What makes people resist, you know, when we think about in the South African context, and perhaps we can also think about the Palestinian context. When the Black South African under apartheid, when the Palestinian sings and dances towards enemy bullets, armed with nothing but stones, when they approach the enemy line that is so heavy with artillery and military equipment, death machines, when they approach these machines with stones only, what is it that drives that? Because it confuses the hell out of these depraved, oppressive regimes. It really is confusing. What is it that propels the person who resists their occupier? And I dug deep and used this beautiful essay on the uses of the erotics to get to the sense that it is the memory, the intergenerational memory of the land, the languages, the lineage, and love, which we feel that must find continuity in and through us, has to find continuity, cannot die, that the ideals and ways of our ancestors and us propel us towards resistance in honor of love for ourselves and those who birthed us. I was thinking of even the languaging around death in Palestine, that they would use the word martyr is in itself just so significant, because the martyr in Palestine and in South Africa says, "Let the siege come, my blood will nourish the tree that will bear the fruits of freedom." It is such a radical position. It's a communal sense of self. It's it's a sense of self as belonging to the people, belonging to the past and the future. And I think that's what Audre Lorde is calling to our attention with the erotics. She sometimes says it's non-rational, it's deep within us and it's ancient. And it's that thing.
And it's female.
And it's female. It is female, as she says. And I was thinking about that, these depraved, oppressive regimes have no devotion. They have no devotion, they have no spirit, they have no ancestor. They claim to even be self-made. They're self-made. And we were made by the mother. We were made by the mother. We were made by the village. We were made by the community. And that mother and the village and the community teaches us to resist.
Sure. Dr. Boyce Davis, you're feeling these reverberations. Thank you, Uhuru, for the particular ones that you have brought. Are there particular threads that you'd like to take forward?
Right. I didn't get a chance when I came to at least say greetings because I was just trying to get the microphone to work. So I want to also acknowledge the colleagues here and definitely people who are tuning in from different locations or looking on at this discussion. For me, because I teach at the university level, finding ways to talk about Audre Lorde's work beyond the sort of accepted divisions we get in the academy has been really fundamental. So it's been so helpful to see the sort of multiple ways in which her work can be articulated, and definitely that people are thinking of her as well, um, as a theorist, as a creative theoretical, one of the terms that we've been working to develop conceptually, meaning that here you have, for me at least, somebody who has lived that life that really embraces all of these identities that she carries, but not in a limited way, but in an expansive way. In other words, who is able to, and I mean, people like Marcus Garvey and others dreamt about that as a kind of Pan-Africanism that brings us into a kind of understanding of ourselves in the world. But people like Audre Lorde, particularly the Black women of her um, type of politics, often not brought in that significant um, identification of where she fits. So here, Audre Lorde for me does make all of those connections that earlier Pan-Africanists from the Caribbean, whether it's George Patmore or James or any of them from Sylvester Williams from the start of Pan-African talked about. But where do we put the women who have defined a particular Pan-Africanist agenda? That's still work to be done. So I see that you have Audre Lorde that work. And if you follow all of her movements, whether it's Germany, of course, the Caribbean, helping clearly have Afro-German sisters define an identity. And definitely her work with CAFRA, the Caribbean Association for Feminist Research and Action, and the influence that has on subsequent scholars and activists like Andai, whose book was recently published and includes a whole discussion of Lorde's impact, particularly in how on her sense of self, Andai's sense of self, as she confronted also dealing with cancer as a diagnosis, how one navigates through the illnesses. So
Yeah.
as well runs right through intellectual identity process that she advances. And then I love that my sister earlier just read the piece from The Uses of Anger, because as you know, for Black women, that's the constant navigation one has to make between being defined as necessarily angry, even if you're not. Sometimes it shocks you that people think you're angry. Like, I guess they do, given the condition that you should be. Because I've had people say, I know you're angry. And I'm like, you know, I got in my place. I'm sure I see everybody smiling because you've all seen that, right? Like I was maybe trying to make a point, or I was just trying to ask you a question. Why do you assume I'm
Mm-hmm.
so that framing us always within that context, but also the sort of dialectic she proposes of to use that framing of that anger, and that there are different levels of anger that we feel. We may be angry at a colleague or a black sister who didn't treat us a certain way, but it's not the same anger as being angry with an oppressor who kind of deliberately blocks you from entering a space or accessing your resources or getting to leadership or what have you. So for me, the ways that I'm studying Audre Lorde as an academic, for me, and making sure I have um, supported and continue to support students who are doing all kinds of interesting readings of her, intellectually and creatively as well, and politically would be where I would actually want to put my emphasis right now.
Mm. Thank you so much, Dr. Boyce Davis, for that input. I'm thinking about how, when I was invited to hold this space, I recognized that my introduction to Audre Lorde didn't come through any institution. It didn't come through access to library books. It didn't come. It came through sisters referencing her as though she was some aunt, in the family. And me saying, who, what? and that sense of her consciousness having permeated spaces where even those aunties who might have been referencing her had just a little taste, not a lot of access to academic learning, or not found that in schools in their time, but had latched onto something, a principle, a value, a line, a poem that had stuck, like embedded in the body. And just by mentioning it casually, it started to make a kind of reverberating music for me, that when I finally, got to study, it felt like this constant transference, this constant passing on and referencing, which is what we aspired to do with this particular conversation, is to recognize the ways in which that the work itself is so generative, and that younger generations, as you are now speaking to, are finding their ways to apply, attach, and articulate, which means it's serving the longevity of this work. Just the naming just is powerful. When I start with my own story, just that name, the good Lord. and then um, and then thinking about institutional spaces in which things like poetic inquiry, a form of creative theorizing or of data translation, is now thankfully coming with Audre Lorde energy, which is those multiple identities. You can't lock the poet out of this academic space. And why are you saying that as though this isn't intellectual endeavor? And then the activism that she embodied in her life, whether that was applied to motherhood or in dreaming or in the fierce, plotting of what, these methodologies that she gifted us. And I started this circling by using those G words of grounding, grace, gratitude, and the gifting, the transgenerational gifting. And I want to move this conversation towards that idea of how you're thinking about what you've received or
Phillippa?
Oh, I just love that the way that Malika is so playful. The G words, the G spots. She gets us on the G. She gets us with a playful, like reworking of language always, because she's that poet, you know, she's that poet who is working with language as if it's food, as if it's something that you actually just have right in front of you and you just combine it the way you want to. And so in a sense, I think what Malika was starting to actually bring us to was to what do we give thanks to? How do we celebrate and say thank you, you gave me this? Because I think sometimes it's something that I have learned as I've grown into who I am, is that when you reference where you come from, when you expand your roots, you actually realize that you're part of something much, much bigger, and that you're not alone. And there's something very powerful with that. And that is actually quite a radical concept, actually. Hello, Malika. I was just saying that you're so playful with your G, bringing in
I
your
heard
G
you with
word.
the G spots, my sister. I was just trying to connect. So the signal
Erotic
is back.
poetics.
Totally. And clearly we are in full flow in this circle. I love the way you just swam into that. I hadn't even figured I was disconnected yet. And there you were. And thank you for sounding back this idea about playing with the words, because even thinking about Uhuru's offering of the word permission, I often play with separating those prefixes with per as per your mission. And I was profoundly struck because often when you're having intergenerational conversations, speaking to, you know, Dr. Boyce Davis or Audre Lorde, people can feel intimidated. You know, even Alexis Pauline Gumbs, you know, Uhuru's here. You know what I mean? This that feeling of listening to Audrey herself, actually in a video in the last phase of her life, saying, to paraphrase, something about, I just used what was given to me. I did what I could with what I had, and I did it in my way, and I answered to the things that called me. And I feel like that simple giving of permission, reminding young people that as per your mission, in other words, this is not a random arrival. You are not on this earth to try to be Audre Lorde or Lexis or Uhuru or Phillippa or Malika or anybody else. It is such a brief window of time. All this death and that we are seeing is reminding us of that grave urgency for you to take that permission, for you to fulfill that mission, or to ask the question, what is the mission? It surely can't be to be on social media most of my time. Do you know? So when you're thinking about your ways, there are already so many young people who are already embodying this way forward. They already, I'm trying to keep up with them. A couple of them happen to be my sons. I'm trying to, and my grandsons, especially. What are they on about? What is it that they can teach me? So I really want to invite you into that, expanding around your conversation with younger, I don't want to say guidance, because we are being guided, we're navigating in other ways. Don't want to polarize it that way, but particularly when thinking about the young, what we are passing forward, how we are passing it forward, what we are learning. How are you engaging or just thinking around that transgenerational transfer, your role in it? Or do you have particular work that is engaging with young people? And then I'd like to take it further out into the room and see if there are some questions that can sound back to us. Anybody can dive in.
Well, I was going to say probably that there are many different generational levels taking place. So I
Sure.
would probably be calling Alexis young, and I'm sure I do this to students, and they're like, Prof, I'm 50. I'm like, what are you talking about? You cannot. I had several of them. I was like, oh my goodness, this is an amazing turn with students now walking around with gray hair. So what I know, I see you. So I the, the, we have to think of generation many level, from the ones that follow us immediately. But for me, the idea should be each trying to deliver each generation forward. That's for me, and help making sure they have the space to do that. So in my teaching and in my work and in my own approach to working with generations of scholars, I want to really affirm that. But then also there are people who come back at the end of their careers to really now begin. We have to really think about that. I always say that Toni didn't really start her major writing until she was already in her 40s, and then has an amazing career all the way through her 80s, right? Until she leaves us and was still writing. So we cannot assume if we just entering that we are sort of behind the ball. You just may be now taking off. So just assume that creative space when it comes and just go with it. So we're pushing back, as you can tell, against the generational framing that positions you only in one place, but that we see ourselves as constantly also learning and also providing that space for others to really also realize who they are in the world, because that's each generation is doing that. And I love the Fanonian um, uh, kind of charge about that, that each generation has to find its own um, uh,
mission.
trait, right? Fulfill it or betray it. So how to help that generation, that of people that you're working with, find whatever their mission is, identify it, and then ensure that they're able to put it in context, critique it, make sure they understand what the implications. I was in Nairobi and I chatted briefly with a woman, and she told me she identified herself as a deliberate feminist. I had never heard anybody use that. So I said, "What is a deliberate feminist?" And she said, "Someone who has deliberately chosen to be a feminist, understanding all the consequences and willing to really claim and push back on that." I was quite amazed that she was so clear about that. As we know, there are always consequences, right? And people are sometimes afraid of them, whether they're not going to get paid or they're not going to live, the life they want to live, or they're not be to get tenure or hold a job, all the things that people are trying to get. Um, to live their lives fully. One of the things Audre Lorde does well is say, we have to move beyond that fear, which has been imprinted, as she says in that famous poem, with our mother's milk, imprinted
Mm, mm,
on that fear to just embrace
mm.
the life to the. I think that's what we need to be doing. And she provides so many amazing ways of understanding how to do that.
Mm. The
Thank
gift.
you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not what I look like. I am I am a black white person. So in the spirit of not um, rejecting any part of myself, I was adopted by white people. I grew up in a white South African world as a white South African, and so I always find it tremendously liberating. In fact, and it's also a Caribbean thing. Like this one time I was at a dinner party in London and I met a poet from Montserrat called Yvonne Weeks. And so I was telling her my story about what it was like growing under apartheid and being black and white and being confused and all that. She was like, "We don't understand that in the Caribbean. Everybody is black." I was like, that is so cool. That is so liberating. It is so liberating. But in a sense, for the younger people that I'm, my children, my young people that I'm engaged with, who are literally white Africans and who didn't grow up under apartheid, who grew up under a black majority rule, and are also needing to find their voices and wanting to make their contribution. And I find Audre Lorde as incredibly humanizing and incredibly inclusive in the way that she kind of articulates from the emotion up, the
Yeah.
voice, from the emotion up. So we come into the world, we make our contribution from our humanity, and that in a sense our racial kind of shirt or skin that we're wearing is part of our culture, it's part of where we come from and everything, but it should not stop us from making our contribution. So it's kind of a tough one to sell sometimes, but yeah, because they're also like riddled with guilt and fear of taking up too much space, and I don't know. It's just like it's a very interesting moment in South Africa, I find, working with young African writers of all cultures.
Sister Outsider, a collection of essays by Audre Lorde, was published in the year that I was born, 1984. And I was born in a particular kind of milieu, very violent, and certainly a context that motivate a disembodiment, an escape from the body, especially in this body that I was born in, Black and female. That escape from the body that also at some point was also revealed through my training as a scholar, that this body is not present in the body of knowledge that I was being taught. And coming into the work of Audre Lorde was truly transformative. It ended worlds and opened possibilities for new worlds in the ways that she draws from the body. She draws from her body to produce bodies of knowledge, that she centers her body and mine and ours gathered here in the production of knowledge that is so resonant that we feel, as Malika has said, that we are talking to our aunt, the good Lord, a friend. And this work, this body of work by Audre Lorde that is so embodied and that centers a body like mine as not only worthy, but generative of radical bodies of knowledge, makes me want to create new commitments for myself as somebody who's committed to creating knowledge, to producing knowledge as a scholar, as an academic, as a poet, to draw from our lived experiences, to draw from this body and how it moves in the world, to draw from the wisdom and knowledges of our grandmothers, to draw from our cosmologies, our songs, our land, our recipes, to draw from that which matters to me most, a knowledge that I can publish so that others who come after me, my students, certainly the generation after, to find this body of knowledge existing in the world and to see themselves and hear themselves and smell themselves and experience themselves in this knowledge that I want to put out in the world. It is to pay forward the gift, the gift from the good Lord. It calls for a new commitment to pay this forward in the ways that it has gifted me with a return to myself.
Mm.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen to that.
That is so true. That is so true. June Jordan has this phrase that she created in a poem to honor her mentor, Fannie Lou Hamer, a homemade field of love. That's how I see it. I mean, I think it's connected to this spiral that you invited us into, that we're still in. Malika. It's this, but it's multi-directional. You know, as Dr. Boyce Davis was saying, like, okay, it's not a linear intergenerationality. It's a whole field of relation that Audre Lorde is making possible. I think about it as a homemade field of love because we have to make it, right? And as we make it, we are also unlearning and releasing the imposed dominant bodies of knowledge, like you were saying, Uhuru, that are that would have us be homeless. So this homemade field of love is everything. I mean, I found Audre Lorde in a home full space. It was a feminist bookstore in the community where I grew up, where they made a little space for us to have a young writers group in the literal storage closet. And what was in there? Audre Lorde's books. So, you know, that was the miracle for me. And there's so many examples, you know, as I've been writing this biography, I had the chance to interview a librarian in Florida, named Linda Q, and she, like Audre Lorde was a librarian, a youth librarian who brought books that were not in the library there for the Black youth who would come to the library, but who were being policed and profiled by Audre Lorde's boss at the library where she worked in Mount Vernon, New York. Linda Q is in that tradition, giving Audre Lorde's work to the young people who come into her library to this day, which I think is a beautiful example of that intergenerationality. For me, the first time I visited Audre Lorde's papers and her journals and her correspondence at Spelman College, which is where they are, and which I just, if anyone can make a pilgrimage, it's so worthwhile. And that has become a home space for me now, having returned many times and loving the archivists who are there. Shout out to Holly Smith, who is the keeper of the archives there and who is another person passing on Audre Lorde's legacy. But the first time I went there, I knew, I was like, I have to make this something that can be accessed intergenerationally in my community. Like there has to be a way that kids and their parents and the grandparents can sit in this at the same time, because that intergenerational stake is always there in Lorde's work. And then when you see the behind the scenes through the letters and the collaborations and the journals, it's even more clear the intergenerational reality of it. So I created something called the School of Our Lord in my living room. And it was like a night school, and people would just bring their they would bring their whole family, and we would play. We would play in the context that Audre Lorde offered, and that went on for a number of years. And it was through Dr. Gloria Joseph learning about that she first invited me to come to St. Croix and support her with her bioanthology, The Wind is Spirit, that she created in honor of Audre Lorde. But now it's such a blessing, because here I am in the same community, and everywhere I go, people are quoting Audre Lorde, and the intergenerational scale is the scale of the generative scale, right? And so we go into the protests, calling for a ceasefire. Yes, I don't have to be the one to get up and read Audre Lorde's poem. It's already a different young person knows we must do that. Of course we must do that, right? Or, you know, going to the revolutionary church services and hear the words of the Lord, you know, are spoken. And so I love being able to reflect back. That's why I call it a homemade field of love. I feel at home because Audre Lorde's words are reverberating, and they're like something that I feel like everybody has in their pocket. And it's not only because of me, of course, it's the deep resonance, but to play a role in that, and to play a role not only for people to hold that work in our self-becoming, which is also a part of my story as well, but for people to be talking about Audre Lorde's work in their families, which is became the case in my family. My dad, speaking of social media, became the person who was like, why would you say that? You need to read some Audre Lorde. You should read this, you should read that. I'm not just talking about other people's families, I'm talking about my family. That's important because that's how Audre Lorde was. Audre Lorde was sitting at the table talking about these things with her kids. You see that she mentions her own children in so much of her work because they were thought partners with her, right? Just like Phillippa, right? So I think it's again bringing it back to that scale.
Thank you so much for thinking about that, for just mentioning even the idea of the school as a place of play, that learning is a form of play, that the kind of often oppressive way in which people come into institutional learning is to restrict the body, to restrict that sense of intuition or imaginative response to when you want to express your emotional response to what you've just read. Why can't you holler? Why can't you cry? Why?
All of
Why
it.
can't you say, I can't sit in this room. I need to go and run across the field, And absolutely love the idea of this homemade field of love, because I'm circling back to this idea of emergence, but which gives permission for what others might call outside of the boundary or messing things up, or might even say is weed or poison, because there's a curation of what beauty should be, etc. But also that it's a field in which the composting, that application of what to do with this anger, what to do when the ground is so hard and so dry, what to do when it's constantly vibrating and you can't sleep, or what to do when you're worried about whether the next earthquake, metaphoric or literal, is going to literally disappear your people, disappear your kin. And this idea of also how being held, as we started also in the early intentions around this conversation, and aligning it with us and the Mother Earth, our arrogance in thinking that we have to save her, and she is constantly taking good care of us, and right now giving us a big slap as well, so simultaneously. I'm bringing in all these ideas of school and play and learning, and family across. Also, you do this a lot, Alexis, in your work, across the relationality across species, because how we breathe and how we live is also not all about us as human beings centrally, as these Homo sapiens, or Homo fabula is a much better version of us, according to Ben Okri, storytelling beings. And the way we've been storing around this body of work, it feels like we've been tilling this soil that is already so rich with Audre. And also where, as Uhuru spoke to a bit about substantially about the simultaneity of death and rebirth. And I really would love to engage with the wider circle in this space as to how they have been moving with us. So I welcome any of your comments. We've had one very broad, great conversation and inspiring from Tulile Makanya. Thank you for bringing your light in here. So we welcome your responses. We'll try to get to some of them in the next 45 minutes that we have. But while we
25.
do, can you believe that? Or is it too long? Oh, sorry. Hello. Am I getting so
only have
excited?
15
I don't want to let you go.
I think 15
I've got
minutes.
15 minutes.
15 minutes.
No.
Yeah.
Your faces, I could see. No, we will not incarcerate you in this webinar for much longer. So we have a 15-minute, very exciting window if you want to be having a conversation with Alexis Pauline Gumbs, Dr. Carole Boyce Davis, Uhuru Phalafala, Phillippa Yaa De Villiers, and myself. Please join us in the water. I know you've been there swimming as well. We don't have only one person attending. So drop your questions or your sounding back to us. In this moment, the opportunity for each of you to talk to a specific, I know, Alexis, you've spoken a lot about about working on Audre Lorde's, on the biography. Uhuru, you didn't name the fact that you were speaking to the body of work, mine, mine, mine. If you want to bring that into the room, that would be very beautiful. Phillippa, if there's any particular body of your work that you would like to share a bit about in relation to these multiple things that have surfaced from the soil. We'd love to hear, but so basically this is also to point to resources, to encourage people to go and look for these things. And also recognizing that while several of us have access to finding these things, just it might be a longer route for others. So if they're on other platforms other than in print or in particular archives, how else can we find your work?
You have to take me on holiday. So I actually I was given Sister Outsider the first time by Tiffany Yannick, who is an amazing writer who came to visit South Africa, and who, like, I don't know, the universe just put us together, and she gave me that book. And then after that, Barbara Basel also gave me a copy of it. And so I think, like, just thank you to everyone who gives books. And I also want to, like that, I want to also give books and show books, and, you know, like bring, when Daughters of Africa was launched in South Africa, there was a writer who I saw buying 10 copies to give to all his female relatives, you know. So I just love that spirit of generosity that exists. And I think for me, this thing about anger, being a transracial adoptee, is I had to really try very hard to find the anger and actually to acknowledge that it was there. And I'm still in process, so I don't feel like I have a nicely packaged, like, you know, work. It's still very much chaos. It's still very much work in progress. But in my last piece of work, which is my PhD project, which is called Riding Out the Water, which is about a war between men and women, there is a very violent scene. And actually, one of my supervisors pointed out that, in fact, that dialectic is something that a lot of poets deal with, the dialectic between love and violence, you know. So like Uhuru, I was also influenced strongly by Kiaripeti Kgosetsile, who was a great feminist poet of South Africa. And so I think I don't think it's ready to, I mean, I've done the project and it's done. I don't know, it's not available on any platform, so I don't know if it's worth reading from it, but, you know, I just like to say that thing about not being afraid of anger, and just being brave and listening to anger, learning to listen, is invaluable, and I will carry that until I die.
I'm so excited to hear that the project is finished, Phillippa. Wow.
It is currently under examination.
I'm learning this right now. I was 10 years old. I've been drawing from a couple of my projects, one of which being a very new book that has just come out, Ke Rapetse Kgositsile and the Black Arts Movement. And From this project, I started thinking about or deeper about resistance and came up with the project that I call the Erotics of Revolution, obviously inspired by Audre Lorde's work. Because when I investigated and looked deeper into resistance politics, it became very clear to me that, and we've touched on this already, that it's really not purely and exclusively about the other. It's not purely and exclusively about fighting against. It really is, it starts with, it is fueled by fighting for. It is fighting for land, for lineage continuity, for language continuity, and so forth. So I have a series of papers that are titled Erotics of Revolution. And I do the work of mapping figures of resistance, deliberately male figures who've had mobility in the world within Pan-African circuits. Eskia Mphatlele, Mazisi Kunene, Keurapetse Khositsile, and Mongane Serote. And in these essays, I dig into the erotics of their revolution, locating them in what I call the matriarchive, their mothers and their grandmothers who instilled a sense of self as a communal self, individual as belonging to the community at large, to the village, and that impulse to fight as grounded in these continuities that I'm talking about, the continuities of land and lineage and language and love. And I call that the erotics of revolution, and that the papers, 2 are out, 2 are almost out. I'm sitting with the proofs. But these ideas are developed in this book that I just spoke about, and also in my poetry collection, Mine, which in itself comes about as a listening deeply into that deep place within myself where I expanded into and met more, and met the story of my grandfather as a miner, as a migrant laborer, the story of my grandmother, of my mother, of myself as people who were deeply impacted by gold mining in South Africa and the making of racial capitalism. I speak of that, and I speak, of course, about survival, which is a promise, because they have survived and they have left this wisdom to me in various ways. And if you're in Durban tonight, I'm delivering an offering on Mine at 8 o'clock, so come through.
Wonderful. At time of the Writer Festival at UKZN Center for Creative Arts, or is it at another venue, Uhuru?
It's at Alliance Française.
At Alliance Française, yes. That is my hometown, but I am not there. I am on the East Coast, Eastern Cape. And I want to bring us to closing with a kind of exhale through sound, again, thanking you, each one of you who has circled online with us for this time. But also, Dr. Carole Boyce Davis, thank you for your presence. Phillippa Yaa De Villiers, thank you for your light. Alexis Pauline Gumbs, I'm saying it in vibration. You echolocate, you get it. I know you do. Uhuru Phalafala, I am with you, my sister. You know that. I travel with you. Thank you so much, everyone, for this time together. It is such an immense gift. I hold it with me, and it will last for much longer than these 1.5 hours that we've had. And I hope that you take the water from this well into your day, into your encounters, into your work, with that continued resonance and reverberation and recognition of ourselves in each other, that authentic Ubuntu practice that doesn't need that word even. It's the way we see, the way we language, the way we move, the way we love, the way we hold, and give ourselves permission to belong, or claim that belonging. As the rivers find their ways to the sea, all of them, inevitably. You are a river that cannot be denied. You are a river that will not be denied. A daughter, a son, born to return. And Father Sky, Mother Sea, remembers each one's name, alone on our paths, great or small, essentially, eventually, the same. I look forward to meeting you in the homemade field of love. Yay! Thank you for your deep listening. Thank you for your showing up in the room online. I wish I could see all of those faces, but these faces. Ah! Rest well and journey well, my sisters. Thank you for bringing yourselves to this moment so fully and so generously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.